These are the chants that can be heard throughout all of Iran during its mass protests happening right now. But what do ethnic minorities like Iranian Kurds actually think about this, and what's been their role throughout these protests? I decided to sit down with an Iranian Kurdish activist to better talk about this.
So, I'm Katerina Divia, and I'm speaking to Sorour Khalili from the Komala party of Iranian Kurdistan, who will highlight and explain to us what's happening right now with the mass protests in Iran. And, well, we know that it started as Iranians calling for an end to the economic crisis, but there's people who also say this is a continuation of the Masa Jina Amini protests. Do you agree with this statement?
So yes, first of all, thank you for having me here to have the opportunity to talk about the protests in Iran and raising visibility. And to your question, yes, what we are seeing now is not a new uprising, but a continuation of an ongoing struggle. Protest movements in Iran never truly ended in 22. What declined was the international attention. After Jina Amini Masa uprising, the regime relied on mass repression, execution, and mass arrest to push resistance out of the public eye. Protest activity became more localized, less visible, and far more costly, but it never disappeared. Those protests were never only about the hijab, they were about systematic violence, gender apartheid, ethnic oppression, poverty, and the total lack of dignity imposed on society by the Islamic Republic. The current protests are driven by economic desperation, yes, but the political consciousness comes from that same uprising. And what the people are no longer want is killed by the regime, and at the same time they themselves face hunger, unemployment, and repression at home. Since 22, we have seen continuous labor strikes, women acts of civil disobedience, student protests, and localized uprising across the country. This struggle really made it into international headlines, right? But they sustained the movement. What we are witnessing now is an escalation, not a beginning, an accumulation of unresolved anger breaking into the open once again.
Mm-hmm. And so you're talking about an escalation. I'm wondering, and I want to ask the question that's on everybody's mind. Are we witnessing the implosion? Are we seeing this breaking point of the Islamic Republic?
So, the Islamic Republic is facing a multi-layered crisis. Economically, it is collapsing. Massive inflation, unemployment, water shortage, and electricity crisis have become a structural feature of every day. On the other side, at the same time, the regime's regional strategy has suffered major setbacks, and foreign adventures no longer compensate for domestic failure, while the regime still controls powerful apparatus, and that's true, of repression. It also lost societal legitimacy almost entirely. The slogans we're hearing today and all the days to openly reject the ideological foundation of the state. This may not lead to immediate collapse, but it clearly signals the beginning of a long process of implosion driven from below.
Right. And speaking of repression, as an Iranian Kurd, do you see any specific role that the Iranian Kurds are playing? Do you see any specific developments within the Iranian Kurdish community? Well, reports have said that there has been a lot of solidarity from Iranian Kurds calling for shops to close down in solidarity with the protests. So, what do minorities like Iranian Kurds feel about this?
Yeah, so this is a very, very important question. So the role of the Iranian Kurds and other oppressed minorities, such as Baluch, is central to the current uprising. Although these communities constitute only a small portion of Iran's population, they account for a disproportionately large share of those killed. This reflects the extreme brutality which the regime treats them and the fear it has of the political capacity. The Kurdish and Baluch regions are heavily militarized. Lethal forces is deployed more quickly, and collective punishment is common. Yet repression has not silenced the community, and on the contrary, Kurdish political movements and civil society have shown a high level of organization. This week alone, as you already said, 7 Kurdish political parties jointly called for a general strike, and it was widely observed. Shops closed, streets emptied, and entire cities participated. These strikes were not spontaneous, no, they were coordinated, disciplined, and deeply rooted in society, demonstrating the ability not only to protest, but to collectively withdraw constant from the beginning. Historically, Kurdish regions have played a disproportionate important role in many major uprisings in Iran. Kurdish cities have often been among the first to mobilize, and they have repeatedly helped sustain and radicalize protest movement when the demonstrations elsewhere were pushed back. This is the result of a long tradition of political organization, strong grassroots network, and decades of collective experience in resisting state repression. Along the slogan Women, Life, Freedom itself originated from Kurdish struggle, particularly from Kurdish women movements, and has since become an undefined political language across Iran, but also worldwide.
Speaking of state repression, can you give us an insight into what it was like when the Iranian royal family governed the country? Because they were exiled in 1979. Right now, the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is well, he's very much online right now. He's encouraging the protests. He has gone on television, mainly American television, to say that he is not opposed to being elected democratically, and he said that he's been preparing his whole life for this. Again, as an Iranian Kurd, how do you feel about this? Should we believe him when he says he wants to be elected democratically? And is he even popular enough to be elected democratically?
So Reza Pahlavi is sadly often presented as a democratic alternative, but this is a portrayal does not withstand serious scrutiny. He has not party political structures, no democratic mandate, and no accountability to political forces or social movements inside Iran. His claim to leadership, to be honest, rests on a lineage rather than a democratic legitimacy. Even more concerning is the political culture surrounding monarchist cycles. Their discourse increasingly mirrors the authoritarian patterns of the regime they claim to oppose. Militarism, hostility toward Afghan refugees, exclusion of ethnic and religious minorities, and rejection of leftist, feminist, and democratic forces. Anyone who truly wants to democratic Iran must understand that the struggle is not only against the Islamic Republic, but also against an exiled opposition that denies the diversity and political agency of Iranian society. To this day, Reza Pahlavi has not clearly distanced himself from the repression and crimes committed under his father's rules. Restoring a symbol of that past would not represent progress. It would amount to collective historical amnesia.
How do people feel about American interventionism?
So, Iranian society is deeply skeptical of foreign military intervention, particularly from the United States. Decades of coups, sanctions, and wars in the region have created profound distrust. I mean, we have only looked to Afghanistan, to Syria, to Iraq. While there is a support for international solidarity and pressure on the regime, most people reject externally imposed solutions. Statements threatening intervention often strengthens the regime's propaganda rather than protest movement itself. What Iranians want is not a foreign savior, but space to organize, to protest, and to decide how their future looks like.
So on Friday, the 9th of January, we saw that the internet has been cut off. I guess my question is, what could this actually mean? Either worsening human rights breaches in specific regions of the country where human rights breaches might be more common, or if the region just generally cannot contain the protests anymore and doesn't want any foreign interference from social media. Because again, when I was doing research for this interview, I went on X, and if you didn't know anything about Iran, you'd think that every Iranian wants Israeli intervention, American intervention, and the crown prince to come back. So the fact that the internet has been cut off is incredibly counterproductive to Iranian activists. What do you think?
So whenever the Islamic Republic cuts the internet, it is a sign of fear. Internet blackouts are used to isolate protesters, prevent coordination, and conceal state violence. And historically, these blackouts have coincided with mass arrest, torture, and killing. So yes, it is very bad. But they also reflect the regime's anxiety about the Iranian diaspora, which plays a crucial role in amplifying protests, mobilizing international pressure. This is not a demonstration of strength, but it's a measure of security. On the other hand, the things you are seeing in the internet to Reza Pahlavi and that is misleading. This impression is deeply misleading and goes to not reflect the political reality inside Iran, as from the Pahlavi side or Israeli side. It is largely a result of media distortion, selective visibility, and the disproportionate influence of well-funded exile network, rather than the genuine popular support. Inside Iran, there's no evidence of uproar basement movement calling for Reza Pahlavi or political leaders. What exists instead is a society demanding freedom, social injustice, and an authoritarian rule without, and that's very important, without railing behind a single figurehead. The idea that one entire population currently risking its life under repression has somehow relied around all the elected exile figure, it's simply not grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm. And finally, what would you like non-Iranians to know?
So what is very important for the non-Iranian to understand is that this is not a sudden crisis, but the result of a decades of repression, corruption, and exclusion, or not even with the Islamic Republic, even before the time. The Iranian people are not passive victims. They are actively resisting, and they want to determine their own future without external control and interference. At the same time, they need the international community to stop supporting or legitimizing the regime which continues to oppress and exploit them. Solidarity and international pressure is very, very important. But above all, respect the agency, the diversity, the leadership of the people inside Iran. The future of the country must be shaped by the Iranians themselves on their own terms without external forces propping up Islamic Republic. And what we can do is to support, to use our social media and to talk about it.